Welcome back to Unaesthetically Speaking. I'm your host, Juliana Mary, and this is the podcast all about what it takes behind the scenes to build and sustain a beautiful brand. Today, we are doing a dive into the world of aesthetic intelligence, why it's important, what is it, and why it is likely the biggest thing you are missing in your business that will also have the biggest impact on your bottom line. Aesthetic intelligence is the ability to understand, interpret, and use aesthetic principles to level up your business. It's about leveraging the power of beauty and design to create products and services that aren't just functional, but also resonate emotionally with customers. And this leads to greater brand loyalty and business success. One of the things that I love to note about aesthetic intelligence and the idea of aesthetics before we dive too far in is there will be a lot of people out there listening or watching who say, oof, that sounds nice, but I'm not an aesthetic person. I don't really know what is or is not good design. I'm not a brand designer. I'm not a product designer. I don't have that innately. I don't, people might say, oh, but my home's not aesthetic. My clothes aren't aesthetic. I don't have good taste. One of the great things about aesthetics is that it can be cultivated and it can be learned. So it's a little bit of practice, a little bit of reading, a little bit of asking other people's opinions and maybe working with a professional. You can absolutely incorporate aesthetic intelligence into your business. So before we dive into too much about the research of aesthetic intelligence, why it's important, and how to apply it to your business, I'm going to start off with a story that I recently read. I just started a book. It's called The Substance of Style. I can link it in the show notes for anyone who's interested in picking it up. It's a little bit dated at this point, but the book starts out with a really beautiful story of in 2001, when the people of Afghanistan were liberated from Taliban control. The first thing that they did were men were going to barbershops to get their beards shaved, and women were going to buy clothes in bright colors that were previously prohibited. And what was so interesting to me about this story is not the fact that this is what people did, because to me it seems kind of obvious. Like if for any length of time, somebody made me wear my hair a certain way or dress a certain way, and suddenly I could do what I liked, I absolutely would go and change those things, right? It seems like a given. But when the media reported on these events, they took the perspective that this was evidence of how pervasive consumerism is throughout the world, rather than taking this look at, gosh, why is this the first action that people are taking? So the media reported this almost as a negative thing, as a bad thing, that, oh my gosh, look at these newly liberated people who should be exerting their energies in some more meaningful way, are instead going out and buying stuff. How terrible that is. But what they failed to miss and what they failed to understand is that self-expression and beauty and expressing that beauty in our lives is so fundamental to our humanity that it's one of the very first things that people will explore and will take part in when they are given the opportunity. So beauty and happiness and emotional connection, these are fundamental to our human experience. And what happens in business is we often, or in many ways, will overlook the beauty as something that's superfluous, something that is, sure, nice to have, but really we should be focusing on our, metrics of our sales funnels, or we should be focusing on, something else, something more taught in business school, right? I've done a number of business courses and deep dives, and I have never heard aesthetics mentioned as the leg up that you can have on the competition, as the thing that can help you stand out in the market. And I think it's such a huge miss, because what's happening is, as human beings, we crave that emotional connection to the world around us. And we experience that connection through beauty and through aesthetics, no matter what your aesthetic is. So when we think about something being aesthetic, aesthetically pleasing, or an aesthetic experience, we mainly think about a thing or place being beautiful and our pleasure that's derived from the objects or places. So an aesthetic experience might be, for example, taking a walk through a natural setting, like in the mountains, and seeing a beautiful sunset, right? That's an aesthetic experience that will elicit some strong emotions. Or maybe in a museum or an art gallery and seeing these great works of art. Or maybe for you, it's the feeling you get when you walk into a beautiful church full of stained glass windows, and the gorgeous acoustics. When we extrapolate, say that 10. When we extrapolate this idea to our own business, depending on what it is you sell, it might be super obvious how important this concept is. So for example, let's say you sell a product, and so you can understand pretty quickly that it should be beautiful as well as functional. And if you don't, you really need to go back and take a look at that. It's such an overused example, but like if you look at Apple products, right? Their big differentiator is the beauty of their products, the beauty of the design of their products. Or let's say you have a storefront. So you can create an aesthetic experience in that space that would align with what it is you sell and with the market you're trying to attract. So that could include lighting, music, scent, and of course, the products and the level of customer service. As a service-based business, it becomes a little less clear, but it is just as important. I am thinking too, there's a couple of gym owners that I met. They have a really cool gym out in Seattle. It's called Blinn Fitness. And if you look them up online, you can see pictures of their space, and it's got a very specific aesthetic. And it fits with the aesthetic of the owners as well as of the people that they're trying to attract. They have, I don't know, I think it was probably intentional. They're really smart business people, but they created this very unique aesthetic experience to welcome in a specific community that they're trying to target. So I also, gosh, this reminds me of when back in the early 2000s, I worked at Hollister. And if you've ever been inside of a Hollister, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But you walk into one of those stores and it is dark, it is loud, and it stinks to high heaven of their colognes and perfumes. And even a step further, I remember being trained at Hollister, and we were actually trained to be aloof and to be like too cool to help people. So if somebody asked you to look in the back for something, you're just like, no, we don't have it. And even though we might. So I thought that was crazy. I would always go check because that's just my personality. I got fired from that job. That's another story for another time. But that aesthetic that Hollister or that my friends at Blinn Fitness are purposefully creating is strategic, it is impactful, and it does impact your bottom line because it resonates with the audience you're trying to attract. So when it becomes a little less clear is when you offer a service or a virtual experience, but it's nonetheless important. And that's because aesthetics impact our emotions, and emotions influence buyer behavior and boost revenues. So when a customer feels emotionally attached to a brand, they're more likely to make repeat purchases and advocate for that brand. So clients who are attending this gym that I talked about, they feel an emotional connection because they are emotionally tied to the aesthetics, the vibe of this place. in the early 2000s, if you shopped at Hollister, you were emotionally tied to that vibe, to that aesthetic. You wanted to be associated with that like way too cool, laid back California vibe, right? And you were probably really likely to then advocate for that brand and only shop at that brand. So before we dive any deeper, let's talk about some misconceptions about aesthetics. Lots of people think that aesthetics are superficial or secondary to the real aspects of business. Like I talked about, I've never had a business course that covered aesthetics. We'll talk about everything else: social media, personal branding, content creation, financials, all of that stuff, running pay-per-click ads, but never have I heard anyone talking about aesthetics. But aesthetics are fundamental to our emotional well-being and our identity. The way something looks and feels deeply affects how we perceive it and how we interact with it. Another misconception is that aesthetics and functionality cannot coexist. When in reality, I think if we just take a second to think about that, good aesthetics enhance functionality. So think about user-friendly designs, apps that you enjoy using, or the inviting atmosphere of a well-designed space. When something is beautiful, we're naturally drawn to it and often find it easier to use. Aesthetics aren't just about looks. They're about creating experiences. And when design and functionality blend seamlessly, it not only attracts us, but it makes our interactions more intuitive and more enjoyable. So aesthetics really do create an emotional connection with customers, fostering brand loyalty. This is another example of a brand that's probably overused, but think about Nike's powerful visuals and messaging and how it resonates with their audience. Their aesthetic appeal isn't just about looks. It's about inspiring and empowering their customers. There's a really great study that I'll link this in the show notes for those that are inclined to read it in more detail. But it shows that customers with a strong emotional connection to a brand have a 306% higher lifetime value. And they stay with that brand for an average of 5.1 years, compared to 3.4 years for those with a weaker connection. So for this study, this research company collected data from over 100 retailers across multiple sectors from more than 100,000 customers. And the report reveals that customers who feel an emotional connection to a brand spend in some cases twice as much as those that are just satisfied. Good aesthetics can elevate your brand, create emotional connections with your customers, and increase perceived value, which means that you can charge more for what it is you are doing or providing. Investing in design and branding isn't just about looks. It's a strategic move that will drive loyalty and will drive increased revenues. I always think it's important to take a step back because we can, look at all the research, read all the books, but we need to take a step back and look at our own buying behaviors. I know for a fact that I will buy things at the store, like if I'm at the grocery store and I'm getting body wash, I will buy a new brand of body wash because it's in a package that I like. Or I'll spend more at a store that I feel tied to because I like how I feel when I shop there. So for example, Anthropologie is one of those stores for me. I'll go out of my way to go to Anthropologie in person because I like the ambiance. I like the feeling of finding little treasures and of taking myself somewhere that feels cute and feels whimsical and it feels like a little splurge. But I will spend more there than I would, let's say, if I'm buying something on Amazon. So how can you apply aesthetics to your business? Let's first take a look at the low-hanging fruit, which are the product-based businesses. It's crucial to focus on product design and packaging. So again, let's take Apple, for example. They have really sleek, minimalist designs and are instantly recognizable and highly desirable. Apple's attention to aesthetic detail makes their products not just tools, but objects of desire. That is the goal, no matter your aesthetic, is to create that emotional connection of desire. For service-based businesses, creating an aesthetically pleasing environment can transform the customer experience. So let's say you're a high-end salon or a boutique hotel. These are great examples of how aesthetics can elevate service. The ambiance in these places makes you feel special and valued, which enhances your overall experience. We'll talk in a minute a little bit more about virtual-based businesses, but I think it's becoming pretty clear, I hope, that whether you're a product-based business, a storefront, or a service-based or virtual business, you can harness the power of aesthetics in a variety of ways, many of which I bet you've overlooked. So we're going to dive a bit deeper into how you can apply aesthetics in 4 aspects of your business. The first avenue is via social media and creating visual consistency across all your platforms. This means using consistent color schemes and fonts, creating engaging content like posting high-quality images and videos that align with your brand's aesthetics, and using storytelling to share behind-the-scenes content that shows the beauty of your process, whatever that might be. The second, and I realize that I'm biased, but it's your imagery. I'm a commercial photographer, so this one really is a personal passion of mine. But investing in professional, high-quality imagery for your website, your social media, and your marketing materials is a must. There is so much research out there that, particularly when we're talking about online shopping, customers will not buy online if your product imagery sucks. They just won't do it. And again, think back to your own experiences. If you are shopping online, will you buy something if the product image looks totally DIY'd, like it was done on somebody's phone in a poorly lit, poorly styled environment? No, you won't, because there's no trust there. There's no credibility there. You need to invest in your photography because beautiful imagery significantly impacts brand perception. Everything from the vibe of your brand and potential customers identifying if your business is the right fit for them, to how much they're willing to pay for what you're offering. Equally important is having a consistent style in your imagery that reflects your brand's identity. So this can be achieved through things like lighting, color grading, composition, and what props you use. The goal is for someone to see an image and know immediately that it comes from your brand. And again, this is done through professional photography. Third is through your customer experience. If you have a physical environment, design your space to be inviting, reflective of your brand. This includes layout, furniture, lighting, decor, paint colors, and don't forget your website. It needs to also be visually appealing, user-friendly, beautiful, intuitive, and focused on the customer. Bonus points, if you are a in-person and online experience-based business, those 2 things should be consistent. They need to match. As a service-based business, this translates to your presentation. How you present your services, your website design, your business cards, and your client proposals. You should be aiming to create a brand ambiance through your digital presence and client interactions, almost like a little world that your clients are invited into that's unique and special. So to wrap up today's episode, I think it's pretty clear that aesthetic intelligence is not just about making things look pretty. It's about creating meaningful and emotionally resonant experiences that connect with your customers on a deeper level. So by integrating aesthetic principles into your business, whether through product design, branding, customer experience, or digital presence, you can drive brand loyalty and ultimately boost your revenues. As we've explored, the power of aesthetics goes beyond surface appeal. It influences your emotions, shapes perceptions, and drives behaviors, which leads to a more profound connection between your brand and your customers. This connection can translate into increased customer loyalty, higher lifetime value, and a greater willingness to pay premium prices. So whether you run a product-based business, a storefront, or offer virtual services, consider how you can leverage aesthetics to enhance every aspect of your customer's journey. From the visual consistency of your social media, to the quality of your imagery and the ambiance of your physical or digital space, Every detail counts. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this discussion insightful and are inspired to elevate the aesthetics of your business. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode. Join me next time on Unaesthetically Speaking as I chat with Megan Gonzalez of Maymay & Co. She shares her personal journey into product styling, how she went from storefront to service-based business, and reveals her dream that no one else knows. Thanks for listening.